Okay, as you can see, we're going to talk about insects tonight, and try to get a little focus on friends and enemies in the garden. So let's get started with the next slide. What I tried to do here is give us a little focus, get us down to where we need to talk about with the bugs and insects in our garden, because we tend to look and we hear the word insect and we automatically think everything is bad. But so I put this taxonomy chart in there. This is the insect tree, and right next to that, just for a locus to try to give you a better understanding of this taxonomy tree, where you see that insects are a class of animals under the animal kingdom, and at the same level, we would humans would be called Mammalia. So that'll give you some idea of where we are. And in fact, we share 60% of our DNA with insects. Worldwide, there are, within the taxonomy chart, there are 30 orders of insects. And bugs are just one of the 30. So that's where this insects, bugs, all bugs are insects, not all insects are bugs. Okay, just like all humans are mammals, not all mammals are humans. Follow that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you get down to the specific insects, like a grasshopper or a beetle or what have you, there are 5 million of those species worldwide. And in order to be classified as an insect, you need to have 6 legs, 3 pairs of legs, 3 body parts, mandibles for chewing, and most of them have wings. To be a bug, they all have that: an ectoskeleton, segmented bodies, 3 pairs of legs. The difference between bugs and other insects is that they only go through 3 stages in their lives: the egg, the nymph or larva, and the adult, whereas something like a butterfly has that 4th stage, the pupae stage, where they go into a cocoon and then come out as an adult. Okay, next slide. So what we're essentially talking about is that in Massachusetts, there are something like 10,000 insect species. And when you're talking about insect species, on average, only 1% of those species are harmful to humans and plants. So if you take 1,000 and you multiply it times 0.01, you end up with 0.01, you end up with 10 insects that are harmful. Now, right away, you're thinking for your brains, you're going, oh, wait a minute, I can come up with 2 dozen. Harmful, that's the word, harmful. Some of them can be a nuisance, some of them can be a problem at time, but overall, they're not harmful. So really, at the top of the list of harmful insects in Massachusetts, you'd have to go with the deer tick. That's what they're talking about. So when you're looking at our garden, there's only 4 or 5 bugs and insects that we need to worry about. And when you are looking at the garden and you see some problems with your plants, what you'll notice is you either have a chewing insect problem or a sucking insect problem. And that's where you see those 2 images. The sucking insects are those that penetrate the plant cells and suck the sap out of the plant. So they're actually just drinking from the plant. But in the process of doing that, they're also injecting a bacteria that's in their mouth. And a lot of bugs and insects, just like humans, we have a lot of bacteria in and on our bodies. So they're injecting bacteria into the plant. And that's where you see a lot of plant dieback, like when cucumbers and squash plants, things like that. The bug injects the plant with that bacteria. A chewing insect actually eats the leaves and eats the plant proper. So when you're looking at the damage on your plant, you're looking at things like you see in those two images. Your leaves and your plants will have spotted discoloration caused by a sucking insect, whereas a chewing insect, you'll actually see the bite marks. And anybody who's ever watched say a Japanese beetle working its way through a corner, or a slug over in the hosta garden, you will recognize what damage a chewing insect can do. The main takeaway from this is that if you, and again, correlation, if you're a person who uses pesticides in their house and yard and things like that, the sucking insect, you need to use a systemic pesticide. A systemic pesticide is something that the plant absorbs through the roots and becomes part of the liquid that's inside the plant, the juices that are inside the plant, so that when a sucking insect sucks the juices out of the plant, they're sucking the pesticides out of the plant, and that's what kills them. If a sucking insect were attacking a plant that only had what happened? We good now?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, the pesticides, if a systemic pesticide is in the plant, and the only way to kill a sucking insect is with a systemic pesticide, a contact pesticide, which is sprayed on the leaves and on the plant, will do nothing to a sucking insect, but to a chewing insect who is actually eating the leaves in the plant, that would kill them. And I gave you some examples underneath of what kind of insects and bugs are in those classifications. Okay. Next slide. So the next couple of slides, I want to give you some idea of how difficult it is to identify friends and foes. So what we have here is on the top row at the larva stage of some beetles, and at the bottom row are the beetles. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to try to connect the dots or connect the lines between them. And Karen Strophopolis, that second one from the top, that yellow one that looks like a ball of COVID. You'll recognize that from the garden from a couple of years ago?
They were all over the peppers. They were all over the peppers in the community garden.
Yep. And look at that big ugly guy over on the far right.
I'm sorry, the string beans. I'm sorry, the string bean plants.
Yeah. Oh, well, you just gave it away now.
Oh.
That's okay. So that yellow larva is directly above the Mexican bean beetle, which is a bad guy. And actually, I wanted to make this simple for everybody if you're going to use these slides. The larva is directly above its parent. So the grub on the top left is a Japanese beetle. The yellow guy right there is a Mexican bean beetle. That little worm type thing is a striped cucumber beetle. And that dragon is actually a ladybug. So what you've got is three bad guys and one good guy.
You made that too easy. I thought I had to be wrong, Peter, because it seemed.
Yeah, I know. Well, I did it this way so that when everybody downloads these and prints it out, they won't have to go try to remember what I said. All right, next one.
Thank you.
It's doing my part. Same thing here. You got the white fly on the left iris borer in the middle, and lacewings on the right, the lacewing being the good guy. But, again, when you look at the larva stage, that lacewing looks pretty scary. It's not something that, if you saw that, you're going to want to grab the insecticide and go crazy because you think you're being invaded by something ugly and bad. And even the white fly, they don't really do a lot of damage until more toward the fall when the plants are pretty much done. But again, they're there, and that might take one thing I want you to take away from this is the fact that just because something looks ugly doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, and in fact, it could be a good guy. Next one. And this is how hard it is to identify friend or foe. Okay, in the middle, you've got a soldier bug, which is a good guy, and next to it is a stink bug, which is a bad guy. And if you just spend a little time looking at that, I defy you to tell me what the difference is. But when you blow up the shoulders, you'll see that the shoulder on the soldier bug is pointed and the shoulder on the stink bug is rounded. Now, these guys are only about 3/4 of an inch, maybe the size of a nickel. So who the heck, are you going to walk around with a magnifying glass to try to see that? So the better thing to do is if you look at the tail of the soldier bug, you'll see a little dot. That's actually 2 markings that are on each wingtip. And when the wings fold, they come together and it creates a little dot. And you'll see that I wrote brown spot where the wings are folded. You don't see that on the stink bug. So that's how you can tell the difference between a good guy and a bad guy. Now, in the garden, you have a lot of soldier bugs, but you also have a whole group called assassin bugs. And that's those 2 photograph images in the bottom left. Those are assassin bugs doing their job to help us in the garden. And on the top is a soldier bug doing his part or her part. We'll say her because they're better than guys. And on the far right, the bad guys, squash bugs. But again, if you look at them all quickly, it's hard to discern what's what. So you really, really need to be careful before you go to the shed and reach for the insecticide. You really need to spend a little time looking at what you have out there and try to decide, is it a good guy or a bad guy? And even if it's a bad guy, you have some time to do some things with it. An example for me is every mid-May and June, I'm constantly looking at my Asiatic lilies for that red lily leaf beetle. And I don't spray until I see the beetle. And I still have plenty of time to prevent it from having babies and killing my lilies. So even though you see something and you confirm that it's a bad guy, you don't have to go into a panic. Okay? Next slide. Here's another example of what you may think is a bad guy, but they're actually our friends. On the left, you have 2 wasps. The top wasp has that big, long stinger on the back, except it's not a stinger. That has that's the delivery chute for eggs. And what this wasp does is lay parasitic eggs on grubs. And your grubs can be anywhere from 5 to 8 inches below the ground. So the wasp has to be able to get the eggs 5 to 8 inches into the ground to lay the eggs on the grub. And that's what that tail is for. And in the bottom is another wasp, and this does the same thing. And in this case, he's my hero because he laid all those eggs on that hornworm that's at the bottom right of the screen. That's a tomato hornworm covered with baby egg, wasp eggs. That was in my garden last year. He was a dead hornworm walking, and I cut them out and I put them on top of the compost pile instead of prayer for them. Next slide. Also in the garden, you get a lot of friends. They're not just insects and bugs, but we have a lot of friends out there helping us. That mantis was on my screen last summer. It was out in front of the sunroom on my door screen. So I went out and said hi to, pointed out where all the bad guys were. I said, go enjoy yourself. The toad was in my garden, as was the snake. So they're in our yard. If you just have a healthy yard, you're going to have healthy friends. The robin is everywhere. Those aren't mine. And Burlington is loaded with turkeys, and both the turkeys, especially baby turkeys, they live on bugs and insects. So, as bad as they are around town, as much as you may hate to have to stop your car and wait for them to cross the street and everything, they're actually our friends, and we should, treat them as such and give them their space. Next. This is where you're going to think, where have I heard this before? Because Peter keeps saying it, but it doesn't matter. We're talking diseases, insects, other problems and everything. It still comes down to taking care of the plant, and the plant will take care of itself. When you go and you do all your research and you look up all of the things you can do to control insects in your garden, the very first thing is improve the soil. If you take care of the soil and you feed the microbes in the soil and the insects that are in the soil, they will take care of the plant. So the best thing you can do is add a lot of organic matter like compost or manures or whatever into the soil and work them in. And again, anybody who's helped at the community garden over the last 7 years will remember how bad the insect and disease problems were those first few years and how much less those problems are today. And that's all from the amount of compost that we've been turning into the soil over the years. The next thing, and I would recommend this for everybody, we should be doing this anyway. If you're even interested in supporting the green movement, you need to take a chemical break. I'm not saying stop cold turkey, but stop putting chemicals, fertilizers and pesticides in your lawn. Stop using pesticides all over the yard. Just take a time out and because when you're using pesticides, they're not insect specific. They kill everything. So if it's a contact pesticide, it's going to kill every insect and bug that you have in the yard, not just the Japanese beetles. So you need to take a break and allow the good guy population to increase, and they'll take care of the bad guys. Keep the beds clean. How many times have you cleaned your yard, your flower beds or vegetable beds, thrown all that stuff in the compost pile, then started turning the beds, and you found tons and tons of, say, grubs? It's because that plant debris is an ideal place for these parents to lay their eggs, because it's a protection during the winter. So you're giving them an area where they can grow. So take that away from them by cleaning your beds in the fall and then turning them early in the spring. Encourage these predators, the birds, the bats, the snakes, the toads, even all the insects, by incorporating good practices in your yard, and bring some other things into your yard where they might grow and survive. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we do fireflies in a little bit. Use physical barriers. If you are growing something, especially in the spring, like radishes, any kind of root crop, the spring is when root by insects take over. That's when they plant their eggs, and they grow and eat your radishes. Anybody who's growing radishes in the spring knows what I'm talking about. So the only way to protect that without chemicals is to put some kind of netting over it. The same thing with your spinach for leaf miners. And then the home brew. I use that home brew all the time. And this year, in the community garden, because we do have a huge Mexican bean beetle problem, I am going to use some neem oil in my Feels Good spray. So that lower right corner is actually an insecticidal soap spray now. So that's a homemade insecticidal soap, kind of like Safer's. Neem is right on the top as an organic pesticide. You can eat the food within hours after spraying with neem. So I'm going to have no problem using that in my Feels Good spray, but I do have to use it. And the other thing is, I'm not going to use it every single day of every single week of every single month of the 2 months that the beans are growing. I'm going to wait until I see that the beetles are out there starting to lay eggs and things like that. Then I'll start spraying. And then if all else fails, you have to reach for the chemicals, and I understand that. But again, only spray the problem areas. Don't spray the whole yard, because you have, Japanese beetles on your Kana plant. Next. These are all the references. I did plagiarize a lot of those images, but there's also a bunch of good information out there. I just gave you a brief summary of something that you could spend a whole week at, and you could probably spend the whole semester at a college taking a course on this. It's just way too much information out there. So I hope that helped everybody. Okay. Now I know some people were interested in fireflies. So let's go to the next one. And I did the same thing. I went and I snooped around and I did a little research on fireflies. And my biggest takeaway from all the research I did is that everybody plagiarizes everything from everybody else. So I went to 5 different websites and they came up with exactly the same information in exactly the same order, worded slightly differently. Next. So fireflies are beetles, and they spend most of their life in the larva stage before they morph into an adult. And then when they come out, they only have 2 weeks to find a mate, do their thing, and go have some babies. The photograph is, or the image is of a larva, and again, that was kind of ugly, doesn't it? So you wouldn't know if you saw something like that. You're thinking pillow bugs, which are not bad, but still pillow bugs. And you're probably seeing it in the shady area of your yard, probably around your hosta maybe or something like that. And you think, oh, again, let me go get the pesticide. I gotta kill that. It's bad, but it isn't bad. And in fact, the larvas eat a lot of snails, worms, slugs. They're voracious eaters when they come out. Because they only have a couple of weeks to do their thing, but they're good for the garden. Where they live, however, is, and this is kind of hard for us to put together, they live in the edges almost. They live where areas that we would not consider conducive for human safety, because they live where ticks thrive. They live where mosquitoes thrive. So you're kind of like a two-edged sword here. You need to create an environment where they love to grow and live, but that environment is not an area that we really would want right next to the house. So we need to find areas and habitats that are kind of away from homes. And that's why we've lost so much of our habitats, because so much build out of houses and businesses and things like that have destroyed their habitats. And once their habitat is gone, they're not going to come back. And that's primarily because you're digging up all that lava, throwing it into this topsoil, you're throwing it into a bin, cooking it and selling it at the garden centers as topsoil. And you're putting it someplace else. So if their larva is surviving in the soil and it pops out in an environment that they don't want to live in, they're going to die right there. So once you lose the habitat, it's gone. You're not going to see those fireflies anymore. You've lost them forever. Next slide. So what can you do? Leave this place alone. So if you have an area, especially if you live next to a wooded area, which some of us still do, fortunately, don't go clean it up. Leave it alone. We're going to do some plantings up at the community garden that may help here, but we're going to get some natives and everything in. We're going to kind of reforest an open area next to the community garden. We're going to try to create a meadow, and that might help bring something like fireflies back to the area. Again, avoid chemicals. Peter keeps saying that. Chemicals, insecticides are not bug specific. They kill everything. This is a hard one at home. Nobody does that. I'm not going to do it. Let the grass grow. They live in the grass. Every time I read something like that, I think back to a few years ago, sitting on my back porch, late afternoon, just sitting there, relaxing. And it was like a scene from a movie. A couple of hundred dragonflies just rose out of the lawn and went off and started doing the thing. It was just the craziest thing. And I know that if I had used, the step 2 weed killer with your fertilizer, they wouldn't be there. So that was one of the prettiest sights that I still remember to this day. It was awesome just watching them rising out like a bunch of helicopters. Create a water feature if you can, but don't forget, if you create a water feature, you're also going to have a situation where your mosquitoes can thrive. So that's a hard one. That's something you got to think about. If you don't have a messy area, but you've got things like firewood that you never are going to use, you just want it to rot, go create a messy area. Just kind of toss them around the whole bit. Throw your grass clippings in there, throw your leaf clippings in there, and just trying to create an environment where they might thrive. Turn the lights off. This is the biggest detractor. Absolutely. They communicate by flashing lights. They have different colors, different transmissions. They communicate with flashing lights. If you have a lot of street lights, back porch lights, driveway lights, garage door, if you have all kinds of lights, especially if they're flickering on and off, that throws them all off, and that mixes their signals up. So you should try to turn lights off and not have lights if you don't have to. And I'm seeing more and more new homes where, for whatever reason, they feel like they got to light the whole house up. And it's just so frustrating. And talk to your neighbors, because it can be contagious. If you're doing good gardening practices in your yard and you're successful and your neighbors are seeing that, they'll do the same thing. They'll jump on board. And again, the next slide, I get some references, but the Mass Audubon is hooked up with Tufts University, and they have a thing called Firefly Watch, and they have some programs and activities that you can do. I don't know who, we got 2 or 3 people and members who are interested in trying to bring them back. So that might be a good place to start with a way we can probably bring these things back, fireflies back to Burlington. And that's it. So I'm good for questions.
Peter, I have one about the grubs.
Yep.
You talk about, not using chemicals. What your experience, particularly in Burlington with Milky Spore?
Yep.
Fact or fiction?
No, Milky Spore works. It's all about timing because it is a bacteria. So you put it down, and if you only have a certain amount of time before it loses the bacteria dies. So you need to get it down, within a week or so of when the grubs are feeding.
Okay.
We used Milky Spore, but our neighbors both had insect weed killers down, so it killed our Milky Spore.
There you go.
I'm in Boston right now, and we're leaving.
Oh, so
It's a bacteria. It's just a microbe. So any kind of CID, anything with CIDE on it means dead. So.
Yeah, no, I know, but it just, in insecticide, we wouldn't expect it to be a bactericide as well. That's,
Well, when you think about,
depends what it is, I suppose.
yeah, if you use a contact insecticide and you don't use your own protective equipment on yourself, by the end of the spraying, you usually end up with a headache and a little nausea and stuff. So when you consider yourself, 100 something pounds getting sick from just the fumes of that insecticide, then you can imagine what it does to microbes.
That's true.
Peter, I have a question. It's Kathy only. It's a little different, but it's regarding my tropical hibiscus that I'm winterizing in the house. I am been fighting all winter white flies, I believe are what they are. The things when you shake the plant and they go flying all over the place.
Yep.
I have tried, neem oil, insecticidal soaps, like constantly. And I even I read online, like you were saying with systemic, I bought I think it's a Bayer flower and rose systemic, put that in there.
Yeah.
I can't get them out of there.
Right.
Do they hurt the hibiscus? They do, right?
Well, the hibiscus will survive. What you need to do next fall before you bring the plant in is spray it with a dish detergent and bleach. So you want to kind of sterilize the plant and kick the bugs out, evict them before you bring the house plants into the house. So
Okay.
I know exactly what you're going through. I made the mistake one year of hosting one of those hibiscus for a neighbor, and I had problems all over all my seedlings. So I never did that again.
What's the ratio of the bleach to the dish detergent?
It works out to a quarter cup per gallon or 1 tablespoon for a little quarter bottle of sprayer.
So 1 tablespoon of each?
Yes.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm hoping, it's almost, hopefully soon we'll be able to get these outside. I have 5 of them in my house and they all now have them.
Yeah. It's not aphids too. You saw some aphids in there.
I
maybe?
did, but I think I got them.
You got the aphids?
I think so.
Okay, you get half the problem solved.
That's right. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Peter. I also have a problem with my hibiscus, but it's with, I think it's Fungusgnats. Do you have a solution for that? Because they went from one room and now they're everywhere in the house.
Yeah.
It's awful.
You either try the ammonia.
No. Tell me more.
Spray with ammonia or try it with the bleach, either one. The feels good spray with ammonia or the feels good spray with bleach. Just don't
Not
do
both.
both of them at the same time.
Thank you. I will definitely try that because I've been using neem oil on the soil to try and get them that way, and that has not been successful.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
No, nobody else?
I had a question about the Asian addict beetle bugs. One year I had a infestation in my garden and it killed most of my Asiatic lilies.
Yep.
And what was the best way to rid them?
Well, when they first showed up about 12 years ago, everybody went crazy. There was no solution. There were no predator insects out there to go after the lily leaf beetle. And as a result, a lot of people pulled their Asiatics. They just got rid of them, put them in the compost pile, or sent them to a landfill. And then a number of colleges, I think University of Rhode Island, started looking at cultivating some predator insects, but then you never heard anything about that. And maybe 2 years ago, I started to notice that the number of red lily leaf beetles were decreasing on their own Last year, I only saw a couple, and I mean, last year I didn't see any at all. 2 years ago, I saw a couple. Last year, I didn't see any at all. So I went from spraying once in May and once in June, just my lilies. 2 years ago, I only sprayed once, and last year I didn't spray at all because I didn't see any. So I don't know if the red lily leaf beetle has just died off on its own, or there are some predators out there now who took a liking to them. I really don't know.
Well, I dusted them with 7 powder.
Yeah.
And I sort of got some of them.
Right. Yeah, I used the a liquid, the Bear product, but again, I just sprayed the lilies. I didn't spray the whole yard. It's a red lily leaf beetle, and it preferences the Asiatic lily. So I
They
didn't
were
go
debating.
the lilies and the Orientals and everything else. I just sprayed the Asiatic lilies.
And I have another question. How about army worms? They were on my Mugo pines, and during the spring, you walk by and you just see a wave of these worms.
Yeah. I don't know. You're gonna have to look that up. You know, again, there's something with 100,000 orders of species of insects in Massachusetts. So you're gonna have to look up army worms and see how to take care of them.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Peter. Really appreciate your knowledge in this
Can I
particular.
ask one last one?
Oh, yes, certainly.
It's kind of a weird one. It's supposed to be a cicada year.
Yep.
Yeah. What is that
Where
a
were they?
threat to us here? And if so, is there, have any?
Yeah,
Any
that's,
advice for that?
that's a good question, because a lot of people view grasshoppers as a bad guy, yet they're classified as a nuisance. Individual grasshoppers, they do some chewing, they do some damage, but they don't destroy your whole yard. However, when you have a situation like the cicadas coming out en masse, then that's just like having 1,000 grasshoppers just invading your yard. It's like locusts. So yeah, they could be some severe damage from them, and you're not going to pick everyone up. So either put some physical barrier over the plants you want to protect, or spray, or just accept the damage, because this is the year that they're bad. It's kind of like when the gypsy moths go crazy. There's not much you can do about it.
Okay, any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment about Shirley's problem. And she needs the neem oil for them, because I've had them too, and the oil kills them. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
I'll have to try that.
And you mean the worms, right, Jane?
What's that?
Worms or the
That
Asiatic
was-
beetle?
That was in response to the worms.
In
Okay.
response to the worms.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
She had mentioned 2 different things. I wanted to make sure it was the worms.
thank you.
All right, I will try that if my Mugo pines come back this year. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Oh.
Well, thank you, Peter. Really
Thank you.
appreciate your time putting this presentation together. It was very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you
Yeah.
everyone for joining. We had a nice turnout. And I think maybe the nice weather today spurred people to think gardening.